Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Two things we talk about today. One, we give you an update and some understanding on what's happening in Ladakh, because you might have seen many stories last evening on many TV channels. Some were celebrating victory, Chin ne ghutne tek diye, and many journalists and many influencers, as they are called these days on social media, saying different things. There were some saying that this is now completely resolved or on the way of complete resolution, and some saying nothing is resolved and China has come and occupied a lot of India's territory, and now the army is worried that government of India, to escape embarrassment, will accept the status quo and cede what the Chinese have taken to them. The facts are, however, as we understand them, are different. So neither side has got the facts fully right, because realities on the ground, tactically and strategically, don't conform to our political biases and expectations. Also, wishful thinking on one side or the other. So for this correct situation, first of all, what had happened there, we've carried articles from many people making different points, and you relying on data or information to make their own points in terms of where the Chinese were. But the key thing is, where were the Chinese and where are they going to be, or where does India want them to be when India says that you should restore the status quo back to April 20. Now, read the story that we carried in the print by our defense editor Snehesh Alex Philip. As I said, we've carried stories from others making different points, but that is their point of view, that is their opinion. The story that I stand by, the facts that I stand by, are the facts in our story. Not just because it's on our platform, but because I think Snehesh Alex Philip is one of the finest defense correspondents in the country. So he's got it right. So what he said was that the Chinese are not there in the Galwan sector. It's not as if they've come and occupied your heights like the Pakistanis had done in Kargil, and now they are looking down on your road to Daulat Goldi and can cut it anytime. But the Chinese are pushing at you on that line of control. They've built up a lot of forces, including heavy stuff like armored personnel carriers, tanks. Chinese have built a light tank for mountains now, and other stuff. And similarly, in Hot Springs area, which is further, if I may say so, southeast of Galwan, there is a bit of movement this side or that, because nothing is marked there. There are a few petrol points where each side's patrols go and come back. So the Chinese have positioned themselves in some places, and so has India. But again, there is escalation because both have moved the heavy stuff. In the Finger area along Pangong Lake, he had said that the Chinese have definitely now formalized or cemented their control over the disputed area, which is between, I keep telling you, think of these, my 8 knuckles as the 8 fingers jutting into the Pangong Lake, and at the foot of this finger is there a little bit of beachhead on which patrols usually used to go. So India controlled up to finger 4, that is finger 4. The Chinese controlled between finger 8 and finger 4. India claimed the territory up to finger 8. The Chinese claimed the territory up to finger 2. What the Chinese have done, and which is what Snehesh said and which is correct now, is that they have come and consolidated at the edge of finger 4. Not just that, they have also built up on the top of these spurs over the past 6 weeks. So these spurs, they are at the heights, you are down below. And the reason that happened, as we now figure out, and Nitin Gokhale, who's a well-known defense correspondent and writer, he said so, but it's also something that we confirm from our sources. And I have seen some satellite pictures that on top of these, the Chinese have positioned themselves up to finger 4. In fact, over the last week, a new satellite picture shows that one more construction has come up on top of finger 4, which tells you that the Chinese are now there in strength. The reason this has happened, for which I was quoting Nitin Gokhale, and something that we have also confirmed now, is that last October, Indian Army, both armies used to patrol along this track. And what used to happen in the past was that Indian patrols will go up to finger 5. Up by that time, the Chinese patrols will catch up with him at finger 5, and then they will show each other the banners and turn around. Now, because the Chinese have built up on the edge of finger 4, that is not possible. But maybe foreseeing it, or maybe by way of a show of force or by way of cheekiness, which is a good thing in these areas, last October, Indian Army had carried out a sizable patrolling mission, foot patrol mission, which went through the ridges and the crests of these fingers and got right up to finger 7, and that surprised the Chinese. So what you are seeing there tactically may be a reaction to that. Now that clarifies the picture, I hope. In that picture, what exactly has happened now? So first of all, it's wrong to say that everything is resolved. At the same time, it's wrong to say everything is not resolved. It's the way it was. So what is, on the other hand, on balance, you can say that on balance, looks like the issues are moving towards resolution instead of escalation. Anything can change at a half-hour notice, right? This is a dynamic situation. But right now, the movement is towards de-escalation and resolution. So what's happened now is that in areas where the two heavy forces were piled up, so because what happens is that usually you keep your tanks back in the harbor and armored personnel carriers and rocket launchers and artillery guns, heavy equipment, heavy ammunition, all that's kept in the back because that's not something that you need to keep right on the line. War in real life is not like Sunny Deol movies. It's more real. So both countries keep their heavy forces in the back, and each one knows where they are. These days surveillance is very good. Both countries have satellites, both countries have other surveillance equipment, from drones to surveillance aircraft with specialized cameras. Very little remains hidden except the plans that might be in your head. So both sides knew that they were moving heavy stuff up. So some of that heavy stuff movement backwards is now started, because once you bring the heavy stuff up, one side does it, the other side has to do it, then the chances of escalation are higher because you are moving up what is called the escalatory ladder. That means you've taken the next 3 steps. Next step will be, if your patrols are coming to fisticuffs, somebody will get angry and fire a shot. Somebody fires a shot, there'll be more shots, and God knows what will lead to what. If you have artillery there and tanks there, this could get worse. So that de-escalation, it looks like now is beginning. There is some understanding that people will start going back a little bit, and this will happen in stages. Nothing happens dramatically. Very often you will find de-escalation will not happen as dramatically as escalation, because each side will wait कौन कितना पीछे गया है और उसी के साथ होगा. The other thing that's going to happen is in Galwan and other areas where the two sets of forces in large numbers were now piled up against each other, almost eyeball to eyeball on the LAC. Some distance will now be created. They will both move backwards a little bit. So once again the chances of something happening in anger now come down. So you go one step down the escalatory ladder. There are many more steps, mind you. So this is what's happening in Galwan, Hot Springs. Some of it started to happen, but as we understand now, local commanders in these areas, essentially brigade commanders from respective sides, will now meet and then figure out the detail of this de-escalation. Of course, the Chinese have been throwing hints that if India does not play ball, if India is too provocative, they will be quite happy to lay claims to the entire Galwan Valley. They haven't occupied it, but then to say it's a claim and draw the maps like that, and that claim remains on the books forever. Now, what is it the Chinese supposedly want in return, or probably want in return? We'll give you an idea. The problem which persists is the problem in the fingers area. So you remember the article that General Panag wrote for us, which had a tough headline, India's fingers have come under the Chinese boot. So it is the fingers area where the Chinese are sitting and they are saying this is disputed area, we have claims on this area. So we are only sitting in area which is of our claim. So they are not yet budging from there, and that conversation will go on and that negotiation will go on for some time. Remember, any standoff with China takes time. Doklam took 75 days. This is just over a month old as yet. So I don't think you will find a full resolution until the end of June. But as things stand right now, things are better than they were 72 hours back, or I would say much less worse than they were 72 hours back, because as we say about illness in a human body, nothing that's not getting worse will kill you, because ultimately it will start getting better. This is a little bit better than that. If the fever was 104 degrees, it's this season of fevers. If the fever was 104 degrees, say last Friday, today it is about 100 degrees. It is still a fever, but heat is a bit less. So that is where we are. Now, what is it that the Chinese want and why? Now, very briefly, I will tell you what's happened on these frontiers. China was way ahead of India in reforming its economy and building economic growth and becoming wealthy and powerful. So by early 90s, China had greatly increased the power differential between itself and India. That is when China began to very aggressively build infrastructure on the borders along India. Now, China also has an advantage because Tibet is a plateau. As the mountains descend into Tibet, which is part of China, and that's flat or rolling flat, relatively land. That's a plateau. So it is less challenging for the Chinese to build roads there, to build townships there, to build anything there. On the Indian side, everything has to cut through very tough mountains. That is the lay of the land on the India-China border generally. Also, the soil is quite hard. It's a dry area. So on the Chinese side, which is the plateau, you can also drive vehicles at a pretty good speed in many areas without even needing a road, particularly four-wheel drive vehicles. The Chinese also had resources and the single-mindedness, and they built a lot of infrastructure, and they were quite happy. If you had a situation where Indian units were all strung far and here and there and supplied by air or supplied by tracks or supplied slowly, so India was not capable of building up big time. So India would have then defended in depth. So India was purely reduced to a defensive role. Over the past 5-6 years, and this is to the credit of Modi government, in the last 5-6 years, very aggressive construction of these highways started. In fact, even before this, under Dr. Manmohan Singh, nobody gives him any credit, but under him, he is the first leader after a long time who said that you have to build infrastructure along the borders with China, including Arunachal Pradesh, for which he ran into a guerrilla ambush from supposed environmentalists in his own party, saying don't do it. So he was not able to do it. I mean, he tried. Then he set up a committee under Shyam Saran, our former foreign secretary, who drew up a very good plan on building this mountain roads. So in fact, the road in question right now, the road that goes from Dabuk, tracks the Shyok River and reaches up to Daulat Beg Oldi, that also came up as a result of Shyam Saran committee's reports. But this was implemented by Modi government. Credit to Modi government and credit also to Nitin Gadkari, because some of these responsibilities were given to him. Now then China began to see this massive new Indian drive to build infrastructure. New airfields were being opened, they were lengthened, and there was a lot of activity on the Indian side. Again, if you see the road that goes to Daulat Beg Oldi, from that road, India started also building some roads on the side going either right up to the LAC or going up to at least India's major defense installations closer to the LAC. For example, that Gogra post that you've heard about quite often in Hot Springs area. Chinese didn't like it because that means that India can now bring heavy equipment and heavy firepower to those areas. So I suspect, I understand, I hear, and I don't think it's wrong that the Chinese demand would be that you don't build these roads, etc., etc. This, by doing all this, you are changing the status quo on the line of actual control. Now, they were changing the status quo on the line of actual control all this while, but as they say, jiski lathi uski bhains, or I mean, as the more sort of proper Hindi or Sanskrit goes, Veer Bhogya Vasundhara, it's also the Rajputana Rifles' motto, in fact, if you can see it on their insignia. So they worked on that basis. Now they've been challenged and they are responding to it. So their demand would be, I suspect, that you guys freeze your road building and infrastructure building activity. Let us see where it goes. And definitely they are not yet budging from the finger area. So that is where the situation on the line of control is, or along the line of control is, because nobody quite knows what is the line of actual control. Now I will shift to coronavirus a little bit. We talk about various states and we talk about a Kerala model, a Bhilwara model, Rajasthan model, many such things. But none of us, there is also a Telangana model. Telangana model is see no virus, catch no virus, test no virus, count no dead, and if some virus catches somebody and sorts him out or her out, then Ram Naam Satya hai, say that in silence and go away. Will not even tell you what happened to you. So that is Telangana model. I'm not asking anybody should follow that Telangana model. But there is one state, and a large state, which has done quite remarkably well, and for some reason has not been given the credit for it. And that is the state of Karnataka. Now Karnataka is also very important because just like Delhi, which is a big metro, or Maharashtra, which has the big metros of Mumbai and Pune and Nagpur, Karnataka has the big metro of Bengaluru, which is a big metro, also India's tech innovation economic powerhouse. Now look at the data out of Karnataka, and I'm quite surprised that that state has not been given the credit for what it's done, and somehow that state goes out of sight, out of mind. I don't know why. Maybe the state doesn't project itself as well as Kerala did, or maybe the state is not seen as attractive by a lot of the commentariat as Kerala is, because Kerala is run by a non-BJP left party. Because a virus is not ideological, and how to assess how somebody is dealing with the virus, you have to forget politics, because virus knows no politics, nor does it respect any. Now look at Karnataka. The new metric now we keep telling you all the time is deaths per million, because tests per million are important. Case fatality rate is important, but that only depends on how many people you tested who turned out positive, of which how many died. So that will first depend on how many tests you are doing per million, then how many are turning out positive, and what percentage is dying. So that's complicated, and that might have been relevant in the early days, but now that you are almost in the stage, not 3 but stage 2.5 of this pandemic in India, you have to move to a new metric, which is fatalities or deaths per million of the population. Now, just to give you an idea, India's overall deaths per million are today 5.3. For every 10 lakh Indians, 5.3 Indians have died. This will keep going up because as every new Indian unfortunately dies, this percentage will go up. 5.3 is quite conservative by global standards. But within this, there are some bad champions. We mentioned those to you over the weekend. In fact, over Sunday and Monday, Delhi 46.7. You can say every day it's inching up by 1 or 2 percentage points. Maharashtra 26.7. Every day it's inching up by 1 or 2 percentage points. And Gujarat at 20.56. These are the three states which are driving up India's overall numbers. If they had followed the trend of other major states in India, India's overall numbers would also be about 3.5, 3.4 per million. Nevertheless, these three are rising because these three have metro cities. So Delhi, Maharashtra has Mumbai and Pune, and Gujarat has Ahmedabad. So in fact, if you look at the per million fatality rate, then unfortunately a bad kind of champion, and I use champion in quotes, Ahmedabad is a champion with about 180 per million dead. Mumbai is number 2 with about 126, 127, maybe 128 today. And Delhi is number 3 with 46.7. So that's where you are. In this count, where is Karnataka? Karnataka is 0.98 per million, which is quite remarkable, because for a state that size, because Karnataka is not a small state. Now, Karnataka is a state of 6 crore 75 lakh people. So I treat Karnataka, Rajasthan, Gujarat approximately as the same size, because they send about the same number of MPs to national parliament. But Karnataka is 6 crore 75 lakhs, Gujarat 6 crore 38 lakhs, Tamil Nadu 7 crore 78 lakhs, Andhra Pradesh 5 crore 40 lakhs, Madhya Pradesh 8 crore 53 lakhs, Rajasthan 8 crore 10 lakhs. So let's put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states in the same ballpark and see the data. Karnataka deaths per million 0.98, but importantly tests per million 5820, 5820. And what is important there? What is important there is the comparison with the all India rate. So all India per million tests today are 3686. It has made a big improvement what it used to be 2 weeks back. But if all India is 3686, Karnataka is 5820. Tamil Nadu 3.94 per million death, about the average that most of India's large states have. 7,810 per million, again a large number of tests. And remember, Tamil Nadu has the big metro of Chennai in spite of that, and again big cities like Coimbatore. So what does it tell you? The more you test, the more carefully you test and then trace and isolate, the more lives you will save. Then you come to another very good state, Andhra Pradesh. Population of 5 crore 40, fatalities per million only 1.43, tests 8,687 per million. Qualification there is that Andhra does not have a big city. Andhra unfortunately is a new Bihar. It's resigned to being a state without a major city. Then Madhya Pradesh, 8 crore 53 lakhs, fatality rate almost 5%, 4.93. In fact, as we speak, I think would have crossed 5 today, but only 2,521 tests. That is way below the national average of 3686. So once again, the less you test, the fewer lives you will save or more lives you will lose. Then look at Rajasthan, which had the early and big outbreak first, 3.15 per million, but again test rate 6,397. So Rajasthan also tested aggressively, was able to contain the outbreak and keep its fatality rates below the national average. So Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra are 2 big states which have done very well. There are states like UP and Bihar which have done very well also in terms of fatalities, but I don't know how seriously I take them in terms of their testing and reporting and fatalities, because they have really primitive reporting systems and really badly organized health systems. But look at these. Simple picture is those that have tested well and aggressively traced have saved lives. And then you want to see other states which are doing badly testing per million. Bihar, 820 tests per million. Shocking. Very low fatalities, 0.26, but you want to believe Bihar's figures, go ahead and believe them. UP, 1600 per million tests. That is less than a half of the national average. Jharkhand, 2,392, once again about 2/3 of the national average. It simply doesn't cut. Now, I will tell you also about 2 remarkable states before we go away. Now, I did ask Rohini Swami, who's our correspondent in Bengaluru, as to why is Karnataka doing so much better. And she gave me a bunch of reasons. She says Karnataka, for example, Karnataka has been has had a bunch of apps that they've created which are very scientific and non-intrusive. For example, on Karnataka apps, you may have seen a story earlier, a positive person has to send a selfie every 2 hours because people self-quarantine, governments can't quarantine so many people in their facilities. So this is make sure that those on self-quarantine are honest. Second, they've used artificial intelligence very well. Third, they moved in to set up containment zones much earlier, and examples I'm given are 2 localities of Bengaluru, Padaranyapura and Honga Sandra. So immediately you were able to seal it off there. See how Mumbai has done so much better now after they sealed off Dharavi. So they did that very well. Also, they had an app called Corona. What else? So which tracked where a person who was found to be positive might have been the previous 14 days to look for contacts. And the state also carried out a very effective online training of doctors, medical personnel all over the state. And the officers that I am told who've done a good job, there is Munish Mudgil, who's running the state war room, and Karnataka Chief Secretary T.M. Vijay Bhaskar, DGP Praveen Sood, they've all worked together. And there is, of course, Chief Minister Yediyurappa, who deserves credit for this because Karnataka is a big success story, and his Deputy CM Ashwath Narayanan. So on that very happy note of one state having, major state having done so well, I would have loved to conclude, but I cannot, because I have to also tell you about a state which is India's most shambolic. I used that word before, and that is Telangana. Until today, Telangana has only tested 38,470 people. That state includes Hyderabad. That is 646 per million compared to all India average of 3,686. So 1/6 of the Indian average. Their positivity rate overall is almost 10%, which is twice as much as India's positivity rate overall until now. Over the last week, 3rd to 6th June, they've been testing 660 a day. It's a joke. It's not even a joke because the joke's on the people of Telangana, of which 19% are positive against the national average of 7.5. What this tells you is the higher your test positivity rate, the less you are testing, it shows. Today, their per million death rate is 3.76. You want to believe it, you can go ahead and believe it. I'm surprised nobody is moving in, and I'm surprised nobody is going to court, and I'm shocked the central government, which now has these powers under National Disaster Management Act, they are not issuing a directive to Telangana government to test more, because this is a disaster. Maybe we'll not even get to know the disaster because everything is controlled and opposition in Telangana is dead. Congress people, anybody who wins an election usually is then bought over by KCR's party, and the president, not president, but the most prominent leader of the Congress party right now is busy interviewing experts in this area or that. So this major state with a major metro, which is India's second IT capital, is perhaps living through a disaster that nobody knows anything about. And as a footnote, but an important footnote, another remarkable state, Assam. Now, Assam has rules about testing, quarantine, etc., that don't exist anywhere in the world on this earth. If they exist on Mars, I don't know, because they don't pass the test of any science. No ICMR, no Ministry of Health, no American CDC, no WHO, no nothing. It's as if Assam has now, India removed Article 370 from Kashmir, but gifted it to Assam instead. Assam's working like that. So there's a tweet that you will see from a prominent journalist of Assamese extraction, Jayanto Kalita, who says that he came back to Guwahati a week back. He was tested on arrival. He was found to be negative, but still he was put in quarantine for a week, and now he's been told he has to be in quarantine for another week. You might as well say nobody should fly into Assam. And I will declare our interest in this, because we sent 2 young women reporters to Assam, to Northeast, to cover the Northeast. They landed on 28th of May. They were tested on arrival. Now, everybody who arrives there is tested. So to that extent, Assam's better than Delhi. In Delhi, your parents or your uncle or aunt have to be someone very powerful to be tested if you are asymptomatic. So anybody who arrives is tested. Both were tested. One was negative, the other unfortunately was positive but asymptomatic. So one who had tested positive was taken to a hospital and quarantined in the hospital. She was asymptomatic. The other was then quarantined in another facility and quarantined for 14 days. And we said that nobody in the world is quarantining an asymptomatic person for 14 days, but who's to talk to people in Assam? In any case, the Chief Minister of Assam doesn't exist. I don't know. I mean, I can tell you his name, but most of you will not even know his name because nobody listens to him. The reporter who had tested positive, 5 days later tested negative. 3 days after that, she was released from quarantine, but had another stamp on her hand saying stay in quarantine for 14 more days after testing negative, whereas ICMR and Ministry of Health directions are now clear that if you are asymptomatic, after 10 days you don't even need a negative test. But she has a negative test but has still been put in quarantine for 14 days. And moving heaven and earth, nothing is happening, nothing is moving, because Assam, Republic of Assam, allegedly in the Republic of India, still a part of Republic of India, has rules entirely its own, just as the Republic of Telangana has rules entirely its own. So the whole idea that India now has a strong central government empowered by NDMA and Epidemic Act, it's all, it comes to a knot in Telangana but also in Assam. So I don't know how to explain this, because Assam also claims very good numbers in terms of their corona control. Maybe there's a good Assam model that we have to check, but to me it's begun to look like the Chinese system. The Chinese claim great numbers for themselves, but then what they don't tell you is that, or what we know is that only the Chinese are counting and nobody trusts them. In this case, only the Assam government's counting, and they seem to be systematically stopping journalists coming in from outside on one pretext or the other. I will tell you that I've been a journalist for more than 4 decades. I have not seen something as ridiculous as this in my life yet, but you know, life has surprises, so maybe I'll see more of these as we go along.